Harry Potter and The Death of the U. Written and images by S. Rube. Narration, AI Workstream. Harry Potter and The Death of the U. Chapter 5. Head of the Table.
They did not leave the workshop all at once. Ollivander moved first, slower now, his steps measured, his attention already turning inward as though the question Harry asked continued to echo in the air behind them. Harry fell into step beside him without thinking, offering his arm instinctively. Ollivander accepted it with a nod that was neither proud nor embarrassed. Simply practical. Tomás followed half a step behind, still buzzing, still riding the energy of the workshop, hands flexing as though he could feel the grain of wood even without touching it. The doors closed behind them with a soft thud, sealing the blue smoke back inside. Outside, the courtyard had shifted. The light was warmer now, the long afternoon stretching across the manicured grass. Somewhere beyond the hedges, something metallic chime. A ward adjusting itself as they crossed an invisible boundary. They had gone no more than a dozen steps when Tomás began talking.
"You,"
he said, almost to himself at first, then louder, unable to help it.
"It's one of the most misunderstood wandwoods."
Ollivander did not look at him, but Harry felt the subtle tightening of the older man's arm, a reminder, not a warning. Tomás noticed it anyway. He corrected quickly.
"I mean, historically. Not process."
Ollivander gave a small approving hum. Feeling encouraged now, Tomás continued.
"U is ancient. Older than most cultivated wandwoods. It's been associated with death for centuries, but that's not quite right. It's not death. It's endurance."
They passed a low stone wall overtaken by ivy, the leaves thick and dark, their shadows stitching themselves across the path as they walked. Tomás went on.
"In the old magical texts, U was planted in graveyards not because it welcomed death, but because it outlasted it. The tree survives where others rot. It doesn't bend easily. It doesn't rot from the inside. And it grows, slowly, deliberately."
Harry glanced at Ollivander. The wandmaker's eyes were forward, unfocused, listening.
"Witches and wizards drawn to you tend to be intense, not cruel necessarily, but absolute. They don't half-commit. They don't drift. When you chooses, it chooses someone who will see something through to the end, no matter the cost."
"That will do,"
Ollivander said gently as he stopped walking.
"You're nearing interpretation."
"Yes, sir."
Thomas replied at once, chastened but not discouraged. They resumed walking. The path narrowed as they approached the main structure of the house, stone rising on either side, the air cooling slightly as shadow took over from sun. Harry could feel magic here, not active, not defensive, but aware. Listening.
"You wands,"
Tomás continued more carefully,
"are known for powerful magic, dueling magic, transformative magic. Magic that changes the world rather than reacts to it."
He glanced at Harry now, curiosity slipping through professionalism.
"They don't pair well with hesitation. And they don't tolerate uncertainty in their wielder. If someone wavers, the wand doesn't."
Ollivander's grip tightened briefly on Harry's arm. Not to steady himself. To anchor the moment.
"You is only loyal to purpose,"
Ollivander said quietly, finally speaking. Tomás nodded vigorously.
"Exactly. Purpose, not morality. That's the mistake people make. But that's why you wands are so rare now. Not because the wood is scarce, but because the match is."
Ollivander inclined his head slightly. He murmured.
"Well said."
Tomás exhaled, satisfied. They reached the edge of the courtyard where the stone gave way to a wide set of doors leading inward. Beyond them, Harry could already sense the scale of the dining room, the echo waiting to happen, the weight of portraits and memory pressing close. And for the first time since leaving the workshop, Harry felt the conversation turning, not toward theory anymore, but toward him. The doors to the dining room opened without a sound. Not by magic that announced itself, but by magic that expected compliance. The space beyond swallowed them whole. The ceiling rose high overhead, supported by dark beams polished to a low sheen, each etched with faint protective runes that had softened with age rather than weakened. Long windows lined the far wall, their glass thick and old, filtering the afternoon light into something golden and deliberate. It did not flood the room. It observed it. The table dominated the center. Long, broad, ancient. It had been built to seat many and now seated few, its surface unmarred despite its age, the wood dark and heavy, holding the quiet authority of something that had hosted generations without ever needing to be replaced. At the head of the table stood Muriel's chair, higher back than the others, its presence unmistakable even while empty. 2 suits of armor occupied opposite corners of the room. They were knights, though not decorative ones. Each stood at ease rather than attention, visors lowered, blades sheathed but ready. Their metal bore the soft wear of time, edges dulled not by neglect but by long restraint. They did not move. They did not need to. Behind the head of the table hung the largest portrait. Muriel. Younger, sharper, her posture proud, eyes bright with intelligence and mischief. She watched the room with unmistakable ownership, her painted gaze tracking movement without comment. To her left stretched a series of portraits. Muriel with her first husband, then her second. Different eras. Different expressions. The men beside her changed. She did not. On the opposite wall hung a newer portrait. Muriel again, standing beside Gerrick Ollivander. Older now. Still sharp. Still smiling like someone who knew exactly how long she would be remembered. None of the portraits spoke. They did not need to. Harry felt it clearly now. There was no conversation on this estate that went unheard. If not by portraits, then by elves. If not by elves, then by Muriel herself. They took their seats. Ollivander settled carefully, Harry remaining beside him until he was sure the older man was comfortable. Tamars sat across from them, visibly restraining the urge to continue the conversation before permission was given. Ollivander folded his hands atop the table.
Well said.
He repeated softly, finishing the thought he had left hanging in the courtyard. Then, turning his pale eyes toward Tamars, he nodded once.
Go on, Tamars. Tell us about Holly.
Tamars straightened.
However,
He began, the word landing with deliberate contrast.
Holly is something else entirely. It is protective magic. Old protective magic. It doesn't endure the way you does. It defends.
As he spoke, Harry noticed the way the light from the windows caught the table, warming the surface nearest him, leaving the far end cooler, more reserved. Tamars paused, gathering himself, aware now of the room, the portraits, the weight of being listened to.
Holly trees were planted near homes. Near boundaries. They mark safe ground. In magical history, holly was believed to repel hostile magic, to resist domination. It doesn't seek power. It resists being overtaken by it.
Ollivander's fingers tapped once against the table. Tamars adjusted smoothly.
In one law, holly is associated with those who act from conviction rather than ambition. Wizards who are drawn to it often don't seek greatness, but are forced into it.
Harry's attention sharpened. Tamars hesitated, then added,
They are particularly effective against darker magic, not because they overpower it, but because they resist it.
Ollivander nodded faintly.
Holly ones are known to choose witches and wizards who are placed in conflict they did not ask for, but refuse to abandon.
Tamars leaned forward slightly now, enthusiasm creeping back in.
That will do, Tamars.
Ollivander said gently. Tamars replied at once.
Yes, sir.
Silence settled over the table. The portraits remained still. The knights did not stir. Somewhere beyond the walls, cutlery clinked softly, a reminder that Muriel was already orchestrating the next act. Harry looked from Tamars to Ollivander, understanding now why the conversation had been delayed. 2 woods. 2 philosophies. 2 very different kinds of magic. And both, somehow, tied to him. Muriel entered without announcement. One moment the head of the table was empty, the chair a suggestion more than an absence. The next she was there, settling herself with practiced ease, as though the room had been waiting for her to complete it. She did not apologize for the timing. Muriel spoke briskly as she adjusted the fall of her sleeve.
I know. It's early for dinner, but I'm going to bed early tonight and I've earned that right.
She glanced down the length of the table, daring anyone to challenge her.
109 years old. Does that to a person.
She smiled then, sharp, pleased with herself. Then she added,
And before anyone starts. Othello is drawing me a bath as we speak. Hot. Properly hot. None of that lukewarm nonsense the young think is relaxing. My back has opinions.
No one contradicted her. She looked at the seating, satisfied. Tamars on one side. Ollivander and Harry on the other. Exactly as she intended. She set her hands atop the table and began to speak.
Suddenly conversations end because a person enters the room? Very rude. Do carry on. What, precisely, have I interrupted?
Before anyone could answer, bowls appeared. Not carried. Not placed. They simply were. Steam curled upward, rich and fragrant, the deep brown of slow-cooked onions glistening beneath the surface. Bread followed, crusty and warm, set neatly beside each bowl. Harry blinked once. Muriel noticed.
Yes, I remember how it worked at Hogwarts. Efficient. No fuss. I took the liberty of sending an elf to Grimmauld Place. Just to see what you actually eat, not what people assume you eat.
She glanced at him over the rim of her bowl. Harry met her gaze, then inclined his head slightly.
That was thoughtful.
Humph, courtesy costs nothing. Information, on the other hand.
She let that trail off and began her soup. Tamars cleared his throat.
We were discussing wands, you and Holly. To be more precise.
Of course you were. You always are.
She said, pausing mid-spoon. She turned her attention fully to Harry now, studying him anew, as though placing him within a larger pattern she had already mapped. Harry took a sip, then looked up.
If you don't mind, may I ask how the marriage came to be?
Harry asked evenly. Muriel didn't miss a beat. She replied immediately.
Mutually beneficial. Next question.
Tamars shifted, glancing at Ollivander, then at Muriel. He carefully said,
From my side, it was stability, purpose. I was looking for work that mattered. Something that wasn't a dead end.
And I was tired of listening to myself think. Marriage solved both problems.
Muriel cut in. Harry smiled faintly.
I see.
Harry said simply. Muriel watched him for a moment longer than necessary. She finally said,
Yes. You would.
She returned to her soup, satisfied, the conversation already moving somewhere else in her mind, exactly where she wanted it to go next. Ollivander had been quiet for several minutes. Not inattentive, listening. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin, set it aside with care, and folded his hands together atop the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the same tone Harry remembered from Diagon Alley long ago. Calm, precise, reverent.
Mr. Potter, I certainly understand the importance of these particular woods to you. Given that your own wand is holly, 11 inches.
His pale eyes flicked briefly to Harry's right hand. A second passed. He inclined his head slightly.
But what, precisely, are you asking?
Harry did not rush. He rested his spoon inside the bowl, fingers curling once around the edge as if grounding himself in the present before stepping backward through memory. Harry understood the invitation for what it was. He drew a breath, then another, and began.
It started during the Battle of the Seven Potters.
Muriel leaned forward at once, elbows settling on the table, interest sharpening into focus.
In order to get me out of the Muggle dwelling, 6 people took Polyjuice potion to look like me, and we all left at the same time. Different directions. And ultimately, the same destination.
Muriel's lips parted, just slightly.
We were ambushed. Death Eaters were waiting for us.
The room felt smaller now, the walls closer.
During the fight, my wand acted of its own accord. It sent out golden fire. Not a spell I cast. Not something I knew how to do. You already knew much of this from when we spoke at Shell Cottage about the Twin Core, but there's more.
Ollivander did not move. Tamars had gone utterly still. Harry paused, memory tightening around the words.
Later, I went to Godric's Hollow to speak with Bathilda Bagshot.
Muriel's eyes flickered. Recognition. Calculation.
There was a creature there, something not fully itself anymore. A curse rebounded off it. It was tethered to Lord Voldemort.
Muriel inhaled through her nose, slow and deliberate.
My wand broke not long after, snapped, except for the faintest thread of the core, just enough to hold it together. I showed it to you while we were still at Shell Cottage, and you told me it was unrepairable.
Harry's fingers flexed unconsciously against the table.
I carried the pieces with me for a while, tried replacements. Nothing felt right, even the ones that bent to my will and accepted me as owner.
He fell silent. The story sat there, complete, offered. Muriel continued to look at Harry, expectant of more. Ollivander nodded once. Encouraging. Silent.
Eventually, I repaired it.
Tamars leaned forward despite himself.
With the Elder Wand, which Voldemort stole from its previous owner, Anne. It has since been returned.
Muriel's gaze sharpened.
And who was the wand's previous owner?
Ollivander looked up, with a clear, crisp tone in his voice that suggested finality. He said,
Impertinent.
Muriel held his stare for a moment, then inclined her head and settled back into her chair. Clapping her hands once, she said,
Very well. That's enough to dine on for the evening.
She rose without waiting for acknowledgement. Turning away, she continued,
Harry Potter, Othello has set up a room for you. A proper one. None of the drafty nonsense you have at Grimmauld Place.
She glanced back once.
You look like someone who doesn't sleep enough.
She moved toward the door, pausing only long enough to add,
Old Batty Boothilder.
Then she was gone, leaving the air subtly altered by her absence. Silence settled back in. Harry reached into his coat and drew out his wand. Ollivander, gesturing toward the wand, asked,
May I?
Ollivander accepted it with both hands. He did not wave it, did not test it. He listened to it. His fingers traced the grain, the surface, the balance. His expression shifted, first curiosity, then something deeper. He murmured,
Remarkable. Simply remarkable.
He looked up at Harry, wonder unfeigned.
As though it had never been broken at all.
He returned the wand gently as if it was something delicate, breakable. Harry took it. Then hesitated.
There's one thing I still don't understand.
Harry said. Ollivander waited.
What I was curious about, Miss Ollivander, is why my wand would act so strangely toward Tom's wand, and nothing else. The twin core and my mother's magic doesn't fully explain.
He met the old man's eyes.
What made the two wands so connected, but so different?
The question lingered between them, not yet answered, but already alive.
I hope you enjoyed this reading of Harry Potter and the Death of the U, Chapter 5, Head of the Table, written by S. Rube. You're invited to join us next week with our special guest, Fawkes the Phoenix, as he intrudes on Ollivander's workshop in Harry Potter and the Death of the U, Chapter 6, The Wandmaker's Tale.